I'm back with prayers and the people who prayed them. And I was going over different things that we've already gone over in the prayers. And I was thinking, without meaning to, I happened to look at different kinds of prayers. The prayer of Paul we looked at first in Ephesians, and that was really a prayer of intercession. He was praying for someone else, that they would have wisdom and courage and strength and grow in the Lord. And then we looked at Jabez, and that was really a prayer of supplication, meaning he was asking, "Oh Lord, that you would bless me indeed and enlarge my territory." He was asking for blessing. So that would be a supplication prayer. So intercession, supplication, big words, but it really means, you're praying for somebody else or you're praying to be blessed. And then the third one that we looked at was David's Psalm of 51, another big word, confession and repentance. He was talking about how he realized he had sinned and he was asking for God's forgiveness and grace. So supplication, intercession, confession. So today I thought we would look at something maybe a little lighter, Thanksgiving. And one of the greatest Thanksgiving prayers that you can have, and I don't mean Thanksgiving like November, when we have turkey and all that. I mean giving thanks to God for a particular answer to prayer. Because there are some general Thanksgiving psalms and whatnot, but this is a very specific Thanksgiving prayer, and it is the prayer of Hannah, which is recorded in 1 Samuel chapter 2. In order to really get the drift of Hannah's prayer, we need to know a little bit about Hannah. So her prayer is actually in 1 Samuel 2, but we're going to go back to 1 Samuel 1 and find out a little bit about Hannah before we figure out what she was praying for. So, by the way, if you're looking up any of these things in the Bible, 1 Samuel is before the book of Psalms, so it would be kind of like maybe a third of the way through the Old Testament. And we have the historical books first and so on, and then we have the judges, and Samuel was a judge. And this would have been the time before Israelites had a king, because Samuel, of course, was the judge that anointed the first king, Saul, and also anointed the second king, David. So he was a judge, and he would have been really the last judge, because after that, the Israelites had asked for a king. And that's another whole story. But anyway, we'll look at 1 Samuel. The book of 1 Samuel, again, there are two books of Samuel, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel. This is 1 Samuel chapter 1. So we know it's right at the beginning of the story of Samuel. So let me find it here. 1 Samuel 1, chapter 1. So we're right at the beginning. And we have a man called Elkanah and his family. Okay? Verse 1. There was a man named Elkanah who lived in Ramah in the region of Zuph in the hill country of Ephraim. Now, this doesn't mean much to us, but it does mean that he was living in Ephraim, which would have been probably the Bethlehem area. He was the son of Jeroham, son of Elihu, son of Tohu, son of Zuph, of Ephraim. Elkanah had two wives, Hannah and Peninnah. Peninnah had two children, but Hannah did not. The reason this list is given here, which I don't totally understand, but I read someone's commentary on it, that it reveals to us that this family was a family of Levites, which means that they were, many of their descendants were in the priesthood, although he's not really, Elkanah is not necessarily functioning as a priest right now. His family line would have been the family of Levites. And he had two wives, Hannah and Peninnah. Now, Peninnah had children, Hannah did not. It is possible that he married Hannah first. That might have been his first love. And when she couldn't have children, he married again. Always a problem. When there's two women, and one of them has kids and one doesn't, especially in that culture, because it was so important to have children in that culture. So, let's see. Each year, Elkanah would travel to Shiloh to worship and sacrifice to the Lord's heaven's armies at the tabernacle. The priests of the Lord at that time were the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas. So, this is important because Shiloh would have been an area where there was a temple. It was probably the place of the ark. And each year, Elkanah would travel there to do a worship and sacrifice. So he must have been a man of God. Even though he was a Levite and was not practicing as a Levite, he also wanted to honor God in this way and go to the tabernacle every year. Okay, it's very important, too, to keep in the back of your mind the priests of the Lord at that time were the two sons of Eli, Hophni and Phinehas, because they come into play a little bit later. Again, Eli is going to be contrasted in a way with Samuel later on. Okay, verse 4. On the days Elkanah presented his sacrifice, he would give portions of the meat to Peninnah and each of her children. And though he loved Hannah, he would give her only one choice portion, because the Lord had given her no children. Okay, at that time, they would say, the Lord didn't give you any children, there must be something wrong. You must have done something wrong. He's punishing you for something, okay? But Elkanah obviously still loved Hannah, even though she didn't give him any children, because he tried to make up for it by giving her a really choice portion of the meat. He gave some to Peninnah, gave some to her children, but he saved a really choice piece for Hannah. So they must have had a very nice relationship. But year after year, it was the same. Peninnah would taunt Hannah as they went to the tabernacle. Taunt, making fun of, jeering. It must not have been a good time for Hannah at all to have this little Peninnah, little snotty girl, who's married to your husband also. You have to share. And each time, Peninnah would taunt Hannah as they went to the tabernacle. Probably made fun of her, made comments, and so on. Each time, Hannah would be reduced to tears and would not even eat. She was so upset that all she did was cry, and she lost her appetite. I mean, going to the temple to thank God for your blessings when you do not feel like you've been blessed with a child must have been really hard for Hannah. And then, on top of that, to have the taunting of Peninnah, this was not a good time for Hannah. Once after a sacrificial meal at Shiloh, Hannah got up and went up to pray. Eli the priest was sitting at his customary place beside the entrance to the tabernacle. So he's the priest, he's sitting there, he's watching. Okay, Hannah was in deep anguish, crying bitterly as she prayed to the Lord, and she made this vow. O Lord of heaven's armies, if you will look upon my sorrow and answer my prayer and give me a son, then I will give him back to you. He will be yours for his entire lifetime, and as a sign that he has been dedicated to the Lord, his hair will never be cut. So Hannah is really, really upset now, and she is desperate, and she gets to the point where she says, I know what a Nazirite is like, Lord. A Nazirite is a priest, and I'm married to someone in the line of priests, and if I have a son, if you grant me this son, I will make him a Nazirite. I will never cut his hair. I will make sure he doesn't drink, and I'll dedicate him to your service, Lord. I always think it's odd when people, to figure out whether or not God likes it when we kind of barter with him in this way. There have been other people in the Bible that have made promises to God like that, vows and so on. I guess what it came down to when I thought about it is, it isn't so much that Hannah made a vow. We could all promise something if we want to. Lord, if you do this, I'll promise to do that, I think it's again that the Lord cares about the heart. He must have seen Hannah's heart. He must have known, first of all, that she indeed wanted her son to glorify God. That was her primary motive, okay? Yes, she wanted a child, but she wanted a child so that that child could serve God and glorify God. And there has to be something about that God saw in her heart, Maybe that she would actually follow through on it, because we make promises too and then we don't follow through on them. Maybe he could see in her heart that she actually was sincere about this. Maybe she had a clear heart. She wasn't motivated by self-serving principles, even though she wanted a child very badly. That wasn't her number one thing. It has to be that way because God granted this request. And so often when we make a vow to God and we promise something, you know, it's rash. It's not really heartfelt. And God knows that. You know, he knows our hearts. So there has to be something about Hannah's faith and commitment and motivation, I think, in this prayer. It had to be clear, you know. It had to be a heartfelt thing that of wanting to serve God. It was a humble prayer. It wasn't a self-serving prayer. So anyway, she promises he'll be a Nazirite. But she's deep in anguish as she's praying here. And as she's praying to the Lord, Eli watched her. He saw her lips moving, but hearing no sound, he thought she had been drinking. "Must you come here drunk?" he demanded. "Throw away your wine." Okay, I think it's interesting that Eli, supposed to be this great priest, doesn't see the anguish that Hannah's going through. He assumes she's drunk. Look at her response. "Oh, no, sir," she replied. "I haven't been drinking wine or anything stronger, but I am very discouraged, and I was pouring out my heart to the Lord. Don't think I am a wicked woman, for I have been praying out of great anguish and sorrow." A wicked woman, you know, right away, it's not just because she's drinking. She doesn't want him to think that she's a prostitute. Okay, and here's why. If you look down a little further in 1 Samuel 2, you will see, let's see if I can find it here. I'm not exactly sure where it is. Maybe it's in the second chapter. Yeah, maybe it's in the second chapter. Let me look in there. 1 Samuel 2. Yes. Okay, 1 Samuel 2, verse 12. "Now the sons of Eli," remember we talked about them, Hophni and whatever his other name was, I don't know. Phineas, I guess, right? "Now the sons of Eli were scoundrels and had no respect for the Lord or for their duties as priests. Whenever anyone offered a sacrifice, Eli's sons would send over a servant with a 3-pronged fork. While the meat was being sacrificed and it was still boiling, the servant would stick the fork in the pot and demand that whatever was brought up be given to Eli's sons. All the Israelites who came to worship at Shiloh were treated this way." Okay, so they're not very nice people at all, okay? And it says down in verse 22, "Now Eli was very old, but he was aware of what his sons were doing to the people of Israel." Okay, remember he was sitting at the front of the temple? He knew what his kids were doing, but he didn't stop them. Okay, this again is contrasting him as a priest. You know, he's not really doing his job, and definitely his sons aren't doing this job. He knew, for instance, that his sons were seducing the young women who assisted at the entrance to the temple. Remember, Eli was sitting at the entrance to the temple when he saw Hannah. And Hannah is saying, "I'm not one of those women that your sons are seducing. Okay, I'm not a wicked woman." Eli knows exactly what his kids are doing, and he kind of assumes that Hannah is one of the wicked women, just because she's so deep in anguish. And you know, he has no compassion on her, though, which is very interesting, until she tells him exactly what's going on and how she really is praying for a son. So if we go back to that story, "Oh, no, sir, I haven't been drinking," she says. "I'm not a wicked woman." Now, finally, Eli gets it. So in 17, he says, "In that case," Eli says, "go in peace. May the God of Israel grant you the request you have asked of him." So Eli gives her kind of a blessing. He says, "Okay, if that's what you want, may God grant your request." And as priest, you know, he does have priestly duties and power to do that. So listen to how she feels afterwards. 18, verse 18. "Oh, thank you, sir," she exclaimed. Then she went back and began to eat again, and she was no longer sad. This is true hope. This is what hope is really like. Hope that means it hasn't happened yet, but she knows it will. She just knows it will. She knows that she knows that she knows. God had comforted her through her prayer and through Eli's words. And so now she eats, not sad anymore. You know, whatever Penina says can't hurt me. I got a hope. I know exactly what's going to happen. It's so great when you have a hope in the Lord. So it changes everything. You know, it changes everything. So the entire family got up the next morning and went to worship the Lord once more. Then they returned to Ramah. When Elkanah slept with Hannah, the Lord remembered her plea, and in due time she gave birth to a son. She named him Samuel, for she said, "I asked the Lord for him." The name Samuel in Hebrew sounds like the word for asking the Lord for something. The next year, Elkanah and his family went on their annual trip to offer a sacrifice to the Lord and keep his vow. But Hannah did not go. She told her husband, "Wait until the boy is weaned. Then I will take him to the tabernacle and leave him there with the Lord permanently." "Whatever you think is best," Elkanah agreed. "Stay here for now, and may the Lord help you with your promise." I think he knows it's going to be hard for her to let go of Samuel when the time comes. But he says, "May the Lord help you keep your promise." So she stayed home and nursed the boy until he was weaned. When the child was weaned, Hannah took him to the tabernacle in Shiloh, and they brought along a 3-year-old bull for the sacrifice and a basket of flour and some wine. After sacrificing the bull, they brought the boy to Eli. So she had Samuel with her 3 years until he was weaned. And then she did what she had promised God that she would do. She took him back to the temple to be a servant of the Lord. Now, he's young, isn't he? And it must have been hard for Hannah. I mean, really hard. After sacrificing the bull, they brought the boy to Eli. "Sir, do you remember me?" Hannah asked. "I'm the very woman who stood here several years ago praying to the Lord, and I asked the Lord to give me this boy, and he has granted my request. Now I'm giving him to the Lord, and he will belong to the Lord his whole life." And they worshiped the Lord there. Now, it is during this worship that Hannah says this prayer that we're going to look at, this prayer of thanksgiving. And you can see that she has a lot to be thankful for, because the Lord has actually listened to her plea and has granted her request for a son, and she now is going to fulfill her vow and bring Samuel back to the temple to become one of the greatest judges that Israel has ever seen. And he's going to be in that priestly line, and he's going to learn from Eli, even though Eli isn't the best of examples. At least Samuel is going to be there, because remember, Eli's sons are really wicked. So God doesn't want probably them to take over after Eli. He wants to raise up a godly man, and he's got his eye on Samuel. So this is a really beautiful story of God's grace and mercy to a woman who just had God's purposes at heart, and his purposes lined up with her purposes, and Samuel was born. So next time I'll get into her prayer of thanksgiving for all these blessings that God has given her. So if you want to read more of it, 1 Samuel 1 and 2. Have a great day.